Anthony. I'd like to give a shout out to Anthony for giving me a crucial ingredient to this presentation, water. Now I want everybody to get out their water bottles and take a little sip.
Presentation sponsored by water.
If you're not staying hydrated, you're going to dehydrate. So, yeah, big facts. But no, seriously, drink some water. If you don't drink water, you're gonna get like all wrinkly, and that's pretty bad. I'm being told to start my presentation. So this presentation is about Red Team Ansible, and more specifically, it's about how we use Ansible, which is a common tool for DevOps and also just like remote configuration of hosts for fun things for Red Team, basically. My name is Jason. Hopefully you now know that, so I just told you, and let's get started. Maybe. There it is. All right, so it's background information about Ansible. It is automation for everybody. If you go look up the Ansible.com website, that's going to come up because that's like their tagline. It's open source. It's command line IT automation. So anything you can do and run on a box, you can do with Ansible. It might not be really pretty if you're using like the shell module, which we'll talk about in the future. But if you can do it on the command line, you can do it with Ansible. The goal of Ansible is to configure systems, deploy software, orchestrate workflows, and just kind of take like a process of that could be like a 5-hour process and just do it in code in like 30 minutes or less. So as an example, for our red team deploys, we have to run the same like script on all of the Linux boxes to install a backdoor. I don't have to do that. Say there's like 5 hosts that are Linux and there's like 15 teams. I don't have to do that. I don't have to run those commands 75 times. That's pretty ridiculous. I'd rather automate it using Ansible, run it one time, and be done with it so I can go to bed. That'd be pretty nice. So the way we use Ansible for Red Team is we just use whatever modules we have just to copy over our files and drop our malware. Oh, my Mac's gonna die. That's kind of awkward. Time out. How's everybody's day?
Sorry, clap it up for preparation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it does. I'm not going to fix it. You could. And then I would not be happy. That thread is going to be on the stream for everybody to hear. I want it to be known that the head of research just threatened to take my sticker off my hat. This is pretty serious stuff I hear, guys. I was chewing my snack. All right, so yeah, we can use Ansible to install malware, to drop backdoors, and install persistence. So that's how, generically, we use Ansible for Red Team. More specifically, we can have this whole thing called an Ansible role. So, and playbooks, and an inventory file, and a group var, and just all this other good stuff to kind of make everything organized and fun. So, we'll start here in these playbooks. So what you do in a playbook is you tell Ansible to pick some hosts and to pick a role and to do that role on that host with X amount of variables that you can set in the playbook. Then, if we want to talk about what that actually means, so if we picked a role, there has to be a role in this folder with the same name, and that role has to do stuff called different tasks. And those tasks can be anything from dropping a file to changing files permissions, to adding a new user, to starting a service, to changing the content of a file. It is the things that you can do with the Ansible modules is insane. So that's all the technical things happen in the roles here. The inventory file and inventory group, that directory, is a place where you can store basically metadata about like your hosts that you have. So in a competition environment, we have an inventory file that defines a group for all of the hosts. We call that all. We also create more groups, so we can group things by Windows hosts and Linux hosts. And we group things by teams. So in a situation where Kenny needs to run Ansible to deploy an AD, we have a group for the AD boxes. So Kenny only has to select the AD group when he wants to run his Ansible, so that way he's not trying to change the permissions of a domain admin on a client box, because that doesn't want to work. And you know, if you tried to run PowerShell on a Linux box, probably wouldn't go too well. Vice versa with Bash or any other sort of scripts. So these groups allows us to get really granular and keep things organized so that it's a lot easier for us to do what we need to do. So we generally create test groups, we create like live deployment groups. We'll exclude things. So in the event where like one team is like a test team that we're not supposed to be deploying to, we'll just exclude it from our inventory file. That way, no matter how dumb we get in the late hours of the night, we're not deploying on the wrong team. So that's the inventory file. Above that is group vars. So group vars is a place where you get to define variables for all of the groups that you define within your inventory file. So these are pretty important, and actually variable precedence in Ansible is fun and amazing. So within group vars, every group that you define within your inventory, you can have specific variables that get passed to that group whenever something is run on a member of that group. So some important things that you'll have in your group vars file is like your Ansible username and your Ansible password, your method of connection, your method of privilege escalation, and I'll do a little live look around at the Ansible we wrote for Black Team, because that's a little bit more open and released than the Red Team Ansible is. I don't want to spill too many of our secrets here. So I'll show you kind of how all these things work together on that a little bit later. But yeah, that's the general structure of Ansible. Are there any questions so far? Yes.
Are you saying that Red Team isn't free and open source?
That is correct. We've never claimed to be free and open source, and we never will claim to be free and open source. All of our public tooling is available on our GitHub. Yep. Any other questions about Ansible layouts or Red Team? Yes, Dom. Then generally what you want to do is communicate with a Black Team that a little mistake was made and just kind of get ahead of it.
And not lie about it.
Yeah.
Never.
Never lie about it. Oh, and also, in the event that you are a Black Team member, it is strongly recommended that you communicate with the Red Team when boxes are going down or are getting redeployed, so that they can keep track of how much of their malware is on the hosts in the competition. Long story short, just communicate, and everything will be a lot better. Right. So writing good Ansible. So after we learned what Ansible was, is how you write some good Ansible. Everything starts with good inventory files. If you have bad inventory files, nobody can do anything because everything's just broken all the time. And that's pretty not fun. I don't know about you, but I like to be able to actually run my code. If even if it breaks, I still like to be able to run it. But if I have like a library issue, that's pretty horrible. And so the metaphor here is your inventory file is like a library dependency, so don't mess it up. Then having good variables in your roles makes things really reusable from like competition. So in an example of Red Team, if I hard code the path that I'm using to hide where I'm going to drop my malware to be like Windows 32/system/mymalware.exe, and somebody finds that and I don't change it because I hard coded it and I forgot about it, the next time that happens and that person's there, they're going to find it super easy this time. So instead what we do is we create a variable and then we document that variable somewhere and then we change that variable every time. So that way things don't get dropped in the same place and things don't get found as easily. And good readmes. If there's good documentation, there's good code reuse. There's like 1.5 billion repositories sitting in storage right now. because there's not good documentation about what the tool does. And if you're anything like me, you know even an empty README is better than no README at all. So, a little demonstration of an Ansible role. What does this thing say? What do you think goes in here? Nice. You guys are really smart. That's really good. So not just any files, but the files that you're going to drop in your tasks are going to sit here to keep everything organized. So I'm going to skip ahead to this. If you have two files, one called example.ps1 and one called example.sh, both of them are going to exist in this files directory. And that's pretty neat. And in fact, if you use a module to drop a file and you're using it locally, it's going to assume that it's in this directory. So if it's not there and you have to like do a bunch of like .. and all this other garbage, it's not fun at all. So just keep things simple, put your files in the files directory, and Bob's your uncle. So next, tasks, if you want to. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Excuse me, C4I.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what I was talking about here is like using your variables to change file names when you drop them. And actually, I have a little example of how I do that in this thing that we'll go over in just a bit. How am I doing that time? I had no idea. 3:22. Look at that. All right, so tasks. So in the tasks part is where you're going to put all of your actual code, right? It's like you're going to have your module statement and like do this thing when this condition or just do this thing all the time. And it'll be like, oh, okay, you want me to drop a file? Cool, I'm going to do that every single time. Actual timeout about that. It's not going to do it every single time. Ansible is idempotent. So if it sees that it needs, if you run the same task twice, if nothing's changed about what it's changing, then it won't change it again, which is pretty cool. So then we have variables. These are things that change per comp, like file paths. Then you have your README for your documentation, and everything's great. So here are your files. As you can see, these are very malicious files. I got a little ping and a little who am I. Yeah. So here you can keep the original names of your malware just to kind of keep things organized. Or you could call it something silly if you really wanted to. But I would keep it the same just for documentation purposes. Then in your task, this is where all the fun stuff happens. So the first thing we do is we use the shell utility, the shell module, to run who am I. Then after that, it's going to copy this file to that location. We don't know what this location is yet. We'll go over that in a minute. But it's going to copy to this location. When our OS Ansible, when our family, which this is also like a built-in variable to Ansible, is Ubuntu. I'm going to do the same thing with Windows, except don't mind that. Same thing with Windows when it's Windows. And we're going to run it, and then we're going to do the same thing on Windows, but run it again. So this is a pretty simple dropper in Ansible. Any questions? No questions? Yes, Joe.
So, like, how this be used offensively?
So when these files are malicious files, now you've just dropped them on a box, you've used Ansible maliciously. That's pretty cool, right? So for the stream, what can you just say? Another way that Ansible can be used maliciously is when the competitors don't change their passwords the first time around. You can then run Ansible halfway through the competition to redeploy your malware. And it's just so sleepy mode. It's so easy. So yeah, this is a simpler task. We have many tasks that aren't as simple. But for the standard run-of-the-mill, I'm going to create a program, drop it as a service. So I just need a service file, my actual file, 2 file paths. Everything just be like a really simple template. Just bada bing, bada boom, Ansible done. Really simple. So as we saw in this example, we have implant example file Linux as a variable. That's where we're using a template in to the shell and like through these modules. So here in the variables file, we set we set the variable. That's the word I was looking for. So we call this one bin example.sh. Call this whatever that is. Not really a Windows guy, but you know. You can also use variables to set like a list of users. If you want to add a bunch of users, use it to set like a red team password and a red team salt. Have that be changed every time. Yeah, a lot of good stuff over here. So putting everything together, when you want to actually run this Ansible, you can have a playbook. So you create a playbook with the playbook.yaml name or whatever you want to call it, and then you give every play in that book a name, who you're going to run it on, if you're going to become a root user, and then what you're actually going to do when, like, so you're going to pick your roles. And so that's our role, example role. That's what we're doing on Linux, and it's all beautiful. And if you notice, back in over here, we can use this thing right here, this little when statement, to run this role also on Windows, because it will only run this when running it on Windows, and it will only run this when running it on Ubuntu. And it's very easy to have like one role to drop your malware if it's system agnostic on Linux, Windows, or networking, just using built-in Ansible variables. So some fun conventions to help you guys write some better Ansible. There's the way you iterate over something in Ansible is like the with blank thing. So at the end of your role, at the end of your task, you're going to use like with items, and you'll give it a list, a dictionary, some iterable item that you can then iterate over, and like you'll run, Ansible will then pick up all of that. It will run that task X amount of times for whatever you're iterating over. It's actually really cool and really clean and a good way to do it. However, there are not great ways to iterate over a list of files to then drop those files without using with file glob. And a little while ago, about a year ago, actually, we saw somebody who had used with file glob in their Ansible, and then when we went to use the Ansible in the future, it was still there, and the Ansible didn't work. And it was my assumption that the Ansible didn't work because of the with file glob thing, and it was actually more of just a skill issue. The files that they were trying to copy just weren't in the directory that they were supposed to be. Actually, they weren't even on the box at all. So it was a skill issue instead of an Ansible skill issue. So yeah. Then, oh yeah, Ginger templates. So if you guys noticed over here, we used this like double open bracket, double close bracket thing to specify a variable in our Ansible. That's actually Ginger templating in use right there. So Ansible works really well with Ginger templates. It's kind of built around it and with it in mind. So if you have like a config file that you want to template in some changes to based on different conditions, you can build a template for that file and then set those variables or those conditions in your Ansible, and then when it runs, it'll drop the file, template in the values for everything, and it's really, really, really smooth. It's actually a really powerful tool, and we don't utilize it quite enough to have any examples to show you guys right now, but there's some stuff that I've done with it that I've made it really popular. Any questions? Cool. Ginger templates are cool. So modules. So there's a lot of built-in modules to Ansible. There's also a lot of community modules to Ansible. So some common ones that we use for Red Team, there's the copy module, which we use to copy in files. There's a file module, which we use to modify attributes of files. So if we want to make it immutable or append only or whatever, we use the file module for that. If we want to make a file in the box just to like dump things into, we can do that with the file module. There's a package manager for apt. There's also one for yum. And there's also like a default one called package that will just do whatever you need to do. there's a cron module for starting to schedule tasks. There's a set fact, so if you need to see if you've already made a backup directory, you can use the set fact module to check for that directory and set a Boolean variable. Then you can use that later on in your Ansible, which is a great way to help make your Ansible idempotent. Then there's a shell, so if there isn't already an Ansible module for what you're trying to do, you can either just use shell and then bash, or shell and PowerShell to run whatever you need to run. It's kind of like a cover-all, and using it isn't great. We don't really recommend that people use shell when there's modules for other things, because it's just kind of not as clean. You can use the user module to add users and all this other fun stuff. So that's the end of the slideshow. I'm going to do a little look through of the black team Ansible that we ran for IRSec. So give me a moment to change the stream.
Usually the modules are also way more idempotent than just trying to make your own shell stuff.
Yeah. For the stream and for everybody again, by using a module, your Ansible is way more idempotent than by using a shell. It's not like Ansible is going to look up your bash history to see if you already ran that command or not. It'll just run it anyways. So using the built-in modules is a lot more safe and a lot better. So long story short, use modules. No, I already have it up. Wait, now let's deploy. All right, so here we are. This is the Ansible that we used for IRSec 2022. So starting here, this is the Ansible that I know really well, the management Ansible. So starting with this, the first thing you can see is we have this little management tag just for like documentation, like kind of keeping our playbook clean. Then in the inventory thing, we define some public hosts. These are hosts that are publicly available and get DNS records from Google. Looking over here, you can see that it's just a deploy host, the store, the VPN, scoring, and the beat. So, and there we'll have more for ISTS, but these are the ones that we have and use for IRSec. We define some variables for this group, but these are the hosts inside the group. So when we reference them over here as public, those are the hosts in that group. Does that make sense? Cool. So
Shout out to the people using elliptic curve keys instead. Rip RSA.
anyways, moving on from those keys. This is actually a pretty good example of how we use some fun things. So the VPN Ansible was written by Dan a little while ago, but it was so good and so reusable that we've been using it ever since, and I haven't had to change it much. So this is the host that we're running it on. This is the role that we're using, and then we are going to use all of these variables inside of this role, which is pretty cool. And tags. Tags are a really fun way of kind of combining tasks and combining the other plays in your playbook, but not having to run all of them all the time. So if you go into the docs, you'll see that there's a couple of keyword tags. There's always, there's never. If you don't have either one of those two, it's going to assume that it's always. So if you run a playbook with no tags, it'll assume that you always want to run every single task in that playbook instead of not running all of them all the time. So that can be a good way to only run like one of your roles if you're trying to test something where you want to leave it in the bigger playbook overall. So the never means that unless I say unless I include management or management VPN as one of the tags when I run the Ansible playbook, it's never going to run this role, which is good for us. So this is the role. Let's go into it. Linux deploy OpenVPN server. All right. So we start here. Let me get rid of that. All right. So the first thing that we do when we run this Ansible is trying to check if we have existing keys for the VPN or not. This is useful because if we want to rerun the Ansible without having to regen all of the OpenVPN configs and namely the client config that everybody uses to connect to the VPN, we can do that by keeping the certs the same. So you'll see later with Ansible, we actually pull the certs from the box so that way we can back them up and just share them in the future later. So then after we check that, we install packages using the built-in app module. This is a little loop that we have. So and then you can also do this like with items. Loop and with items are kind of the same, but one's being depreciated and the other one's not. I don't remember which. So we just loop over those 3 packages. We install them all using apt, and then it's beautiful. Then we use pip to install the Python cryptography package. Then after that, we use an include task statement to separate these 5 tasks into different files to keep things more organized and clean. So the first thing we're going to look at is the certificate authority, PKI. So we build the user using the user one. We create we change the directory that everything's going to go into and make sure that the CA that we just made is the owner of that everything. Then we copy over the root CA key, or we make a new CA key using this when variable. If the key already exists, we copy it over. If it doesn't exist, we make a new one. Then we copy over the certs. Then we use this community package, this community module to assign the cert using all of these fun things, all these fun different variables. And then we self-assign a root CA cert, and that's all we do with that. Then coming back over to our main, after we've done that, we'll set up our OpenVPN. So OpenVPN server PKI. So we're going to generate our OpenVPN private key. Then we sign it. Then we sign it again. Well, I don't think it's quite signing it again, but you guys get the gist. Then we copy over our key, or we don't copy over the key based on if we have it already or not. Then we back it up if it wasn't already created. Then we move the cert into the OpenVPN server thing. Then after that, we do the same thing for the client, and then we go into the OpenVPN server. So it's going to use a Jinja template to copy over the config file for the server. Then it's going to set a setting in etc system CTL. And finally, it turns it on using the built-in systemd module. So that should be a relatively vague understanding of how how different modules kind of work together. So, are there any questions? You guys followed all of that? Cool. So if I asked Chase to make a little Ansible task to drop a single piece of malware on a Linux host, you could do that. Yeah. I asked if you had any questions, and I noticed that you weren't looking at my presentation. Maybe a bit sad, so I figured I would put you on the spot, so I can do that. What about Sohail? Do you think you could write some Ansible for Red Team after this presentation? Okay. Okay. What are you guys working on over there? You already had demo time. This is research time. Huh. So I think we need to make the meetings like 17 hours long. Give you 14 hours to do the demos. And then Cahoots? With Cahoots? Is the Kahoot done? Yes. All right. So to test your knowledge, we have a Kahoot. Hopefully you were paying attention over there, Chase. So I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to put the Kahoot up in just a minute. Just to hold on, everybody.
We would do it in like science class, and you would have to find your group in 60 seconds and then start, and then people would just start yelling out answers.
Let's go. All right. All right, everybody. So it's going to be a race to sign up because there's only 10 people who can play this Kahoot. Yeah, it's the student one.
Sorry, you can play it as a
So play it as a team or play it by yourself.
Just play with the people at your table.
Yeah, work together, communicate. What did we learn earlier? Communication solves all the problems.
Come on with the table, man. Okay, cool.
Oh, I love you, man.
Joe, he can kick. Can you? Are you using code? Yeah, kill Joe. Yeah. Sorry, is there one per table now? Which icon is small? There's not enough people. There's not enough accounts on Twitter. Brad, are you in? I'm not in. Brad, one per table. One per table. Come on. One per table. I'm programming. What the hell? Y'all want console or not? Dude, it's console on your bag. It's on your live and GitHub.
I'm working on it.
Put the mic next to the computer.
Oh, wait, that's not. Bruh.
Sarah, you want to play with me? You on my team?
I'm trying to get the music for everybody.
Check our username. Yo, they got icons now? When
There
did
it is.
Kahoot get lit? What the hell did Kahoot get lit? Get a little dragon action. Whoa, accessories. Dude, how did Kahoot get so fun?
We have so many options to buy. Can we just do
All right.
meeting Kahoots like Anthony?
So, is everybody in? Anybody not in that wants to be in? All right. Let's start.
Dude, we can buy Kahoot subscription.
Which of these Ansible value locations will be considered first? This is variable precedence within Ansible.
Did you cover all this?
Yes. This was presented upon. Totally was. Totally was not covered. I'll rule some answers out for you guys. Is that one?
Jason, please explain in what order are those evaluated?
All right, so from lowest to highest, highest being the one that we applied in when everything actually ran, it goes there, then it's a toss-up between those two, and then it's that one. Does that make sense?
Between host and group bars, I don't actually know which one is first.
So,
It's like in order of where it checks first, the next one will override it. If it's
yes.
So
So it'll check.
It goes to defaults. If there's a value, it'll go to group. If there's a value, it overrides it.
Uh-huh.
That's like how the order works.
If you pass something on the command line, it will override all of that.
Yes.
Anything you pass on the command line will just say, okay, you definitely want that.
I think
Yes.
host is technically above group. But
I think so too. I can't remember.
I don't remember
I
either.
don't know if it's even explicit in the documentation. It's just,
Have a list actually, and that's where
Yep.
always check the docs. That's the answer.
All right. There we go. We got two groups who scored points. Good job, guys. Cool. What's the difference between defaults and variables? I'll give you a hint. Defaults are like your already existent value. Your variable is something that you can add in afterwards. So when you don't have a default set, well, then there's no value for that variable. If the variable is not set, then that's just not a variable at all. And hey, yeah, pretty much. Good job, everybody. Points.
So everyone's paying attention.
Cool. Next question. What's the difference between shell and command modules? So, with the shell module, can you have pipes or not? With the command module, does it work on Windows? Maybe. Sometimes. Not a guarantee. Win command.
Sorry, we're gaming.
By the way, if you're not getting these right, it is totally my fault for not making this Kahoot based on my presentation earlier. But in my defense, I was told not to make a Kahoot because there's not community time. That have been up here for like 45 minutes already. Hey, somebody new's on the leaderboard.
We on the streak.
Go work. All right, next question. The Ansible keyword enables tasks to execute tasks conditionally. Which Ansible keyword? I'll give you a hint. This was talked about during my presentation, and it was in all of the examples. I wonder. I wonder. I'll make it there in time. All right, so it was when. Good job. Next question. What does idempotency mean? This is not an Ansible question. This is just everything in general.
Next question is, when is Jason's quiz? Answer is 10 minutes.
Guess what? I'll be there on time. Combinatorics. We have a quiz every Friday. Every Friday.
You better run, boy.
Good work. Ansible only changes what it needs to. Good job. Next question. True or false? I'm going to give you a hint. It has nothing to do with shells at all. This has to do more about permissions. Discord notifications. It's mine. It's through the Quick. The answer was false. Yeah, become will escalate your permissions.
Sarah, you let the timer run out. This guy not so good.
Oh, Brady and Sarah fell from second place. All right, fourth question. What is the Ansible playbook? Collections of tasks or roles, a group of Bash Python scripts. I think it's this one. A group of hosts. Hurry up, hurry up. Two more answers, hurry up, come on. Nice. True or false?
4 more questions.
Ansible delivery makes it possible to write non-idempotent code. This one, based on the previous question, should be very easy to answer. I wonder. People are leaving my Kahoot, and I'm upset. I also have class. So I also have class. Nice. It is false. It's supposed to. Yeah, it's supposed to be really easy to write idempotent code. 3 more questions. Templating and copying, difference.
Caleb, can you crouch?
You just went in the line of fire.
Any more people?
Watch out, this is an intense Kahoot right now.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
That streak.
2 more questions. What's an inventory file? Nice. I feel like the other ones. Yep. Cool. Last question.
Someone's just a Kiwi.
What is an Ansible role? Is it a reasonable group of tasks with one purpose, a least privilege for our playbooks, a way to manage credentials, or a security group for Ansible? Hopefully, after my presentation, you should know exactly what a role is and how to write one. If you don't know, I failed, and that's on me. Hope you guys have fun with this Kahoot. 3, 2, 1. Who's going to win? Okay, security groups for Ansible, least privilege for playbooks, not true. Just in general, not true. Second place, Brady. Good job. First place,
It froze. Yeah.
Cope. All right, good job, everybody. Hopefully you guys learned stuff. I got to do my Kahoot. I'm happy. Hey, stream, peace out. You guys are great. Hope you guys had a good time. We'll see you in the future next week with more presentations.
What's our topic next week, Kenny?
What's the topic next week, Kenny?
Mr. Anderson.
It is,
What's our topic? Next week.
I believe it's intro to Windows. Advanced Windows.
Advanced Windows? All right. Goodbye, stream. Come back next week for Advanced Windows.
See you next week.
See you next week.